When you were telling the platform about the virus, the left was ridiculing you for it too. Are you serious, Guess? Because I remember back in the day, in January and February, I was super interested in the virus, and I was covering the virus story a ton because I was supposed to be going to China. But what was the left saying about me, Guess? What were leftists on Twitch saying about me back in January and February when I was covering the virus? And I was, at the time, I was saying this is really serious. And I specifically remember, guys, I went back and looked for my old streams, but they don't keep them long enough, and so I couldn't find them. But I specifically remember in January and February, way before this coronavirus became a huge deal, I started following the coronavirus story extremely closely right when it came out in January. Early January, that was the first thing. And I started following it day in and day out, and I was following the news stories because, again, I was supposed to go to China in April of this year to visit my sister. And so I was following the news stories about the coronavirus very closely. And I specifically had a Chinese visa application printed. I had formal invites to go to China, which you need to apply for a visa in China. I had copies of my passport made. I had the form filled out. I had everything I had printed and ready to apply for my visa in China, and this is in January. And I never submitted it because at the time in January and February, I was the one that was saying this is a very serious deal. This is a very real deal. And I specifically remember saying, China has just locked down Wuhan, and then they kept expanding the lockdown, and there was like at one point 50 million or 75 million people that were locked down in China. And that had, at the time, that had never been done for a public health issue. Like, we'd never done a quarantine of that many people ever in all of human history. And there was a big debate about whether that's public health policy is good, et cetera, et cetera. And I specifically remember saying and arguing they would not be shutting down. China would not be shutting down like this if this was not a big deal. Therefore, I held off on applying for my visa and purchasing my plane ticket. I was supposed to be in China right now. And in January and February, I held off on purchasing all that. And yeah, and now Guess is reminding me, one of my Twitch viewers is reminding me that I was criticized at the time for saying that I was overreacting, that I was following Trump talking points and typical criticisms. And I specifically remember taking this very seriously at the time because of the reasons I stated. And I specifically remember making the point that this has to be serious because otherwise China would not lock down entire cities and provinces and this many people like this. And at the time, people were saying, no, it's not a big deal. You're overreacting. This is the flu. It's so weird how everything is sort of flipped, you know, because early on, I was taking it seriously, saying, no way, this is not just the flu. This is not the flu. This is very serious. Like, I'm not going to go to China. I'm not going to buy my Chinese plane tickets at this point. China wouldn't be locking down these cities like this if this was just the flu. I was arguing it was really, really, really serious. And then being criticized back then for, oh, you're overreacting. It's just the flu. It's just like SARS in 2003. It was no bit different than SARS in 2003. Blah 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 blah. And then as we get more information and we find out that, yeah, this is serious, but it's also not the end of the world, and you start recognizing that it's got a survival rate of 99% of people survive. And then I started to see these extremely overreactions by governments, including governments locking down people and causing an economic collapse, purposely crashing the economy. And then I started saying, well, hold on, like the cure can't be worse than the problem. We're going to have a lot of deaths from the economic collapse. And then I get attacked for saying I'm not taking it seriously enough. So it's like, doesn't matter what you do, they just say the opposite and criticize you the opposite way. And it's just, I've been right both times. I've been right both times when I was on each side of the issue. I ended up being basically right. Came out on those roundtables you were on. Ooh, I wonder if those are on YouTube, Guess. Does anybody have those? Oh my gosh.